So, with almost 2 months of racing, the 2025 pro cycling season is well underway, and if you watched any of the racing, you might have heard about this brand new yellow card system. Today, I want to talk about it. First of all, as most of you know, in the sport of cycling, there's a governing body called the UCI, and they've got a rule set. The riders, the sports directors, the moto drivers, everyone in the race convoy needs to follow the rules, otherwise they get penalized. Now, these punishments vary depending on which rule in the rulebook you actually broke. For example, if you urinate in public, which is not allowed, you can get a Swiss franc fine to pay to the UCI. But if a rider performs a more serious crime, he could get a more serious punishment like a relegation to the last position in the group or disqualification out of the race immediately. Now, since the start of 2025, UCI commissaires in the race can also hand out yellow cards whenever the behavior is susceptible of causing a risk for safety. Basically, when a rider in the race does something that could cause danger to another person in the race. Now, the next part is where it gets interesting. If a rider receives 2 yellow cards within a single race, they get disqualified from that race, plus a 7-day suspension. If a rider receives 3 yellow cards within a 30-day period, they get a 14-day suspension. And lastly, if a rider receives 6 yellow cards within a 1-year period, they receive a 30-day suspension. So basically what I said so far, if riders do something dangerous, they could get a yellow card, and if they get too many, they get suspended. But why did the UCI decide to make this yellow card system? What problem does it actually solve? I see the yellow card system as a formal system to penalize recurring incursions on the UCI rules. Basically, what I mean with that is, for example, if Jasper Philipsen shows up to a Tour de France and in 2 separate sprints in that same Tour de France, he deviates and endangers an opponent, before the yellow card system, each of these 2 deviations by Jasper Philipsen would be seen as isolated events. Basically, he'd get a relegation for the first one and a relegation for the second one. But if we applied a brand new yellow card system, then for the first deviation he'd get a relegation and a yellow card, and for the second deviation, a relegation once again, but a second yellow card, which means that 2 yellow cards equals a disqualification from the race, plus a 7-day suspension. Now, it's important to note that a yellow card that has been taken into account for a suspension basically expires. So if I receive 2 yellow cards in the same stage race, I get that 7-day suspension and a disqualification from that race. But if I get another yellow card that same month, I'm not actually going to get a 14-day suspension, because the first 2 yellow cards have expired. Now, so far, all of this sounds pretty good. Riders that perform dangerous things multiple times in the same race or within a certain period get penalized more heavily. Let's be clear, that's a good thing, and this yellow card system is a good improvement. But I have to say, after seeing it in action for the last 2 months, it is very flawed. And I want to go through every single issue I have with it. Starting off with my first problem. In current form, the yellow card system is too lenient, making it ineffective at disincentivizing dangerous behavior. A few minutes ago I spoke about the fact that multiple yellow cards could lead to a suspension. For example, if a rider got 3 yellow cards within a 30-day period, they'd get a 14-day suspension. Let's think that through for a second. If a rider within a 30-day period 3 times endangers the people around him in the race, they get a 14-day suspension only? Keeping in mind that an average rider rides around 60 race days per year, and between their races there's often periods of 5 to 7 days, so they're barely going to miss any race days. And that's for endangering their colleagues 3 times within a 30-day period. Now, I'm also of the opinion that this part of the yellow card system is basically useless, because getting 3 yellow cards within a 30-day period, in my last 15 years of watching cycling obsessively, not a single rider would have gotten that. Not even Jasper Philipsen in the Tour de France 2023. Basically what I'm trying to say is, it's nearly impossible for this 3 yellow card penalty to ever be applied in the sport of cycling. But the next part is even crazier to me. If a rider gets 6 yellow cards within a year, they get a 30-day suspension only? This means riders can get away with endangering the life of their colleagues 5 times before getting only a 30-day suspension. Like, who came up with this? A 30-day suspension is not nearly enough for that. So yeah, the way the system is set up is just way too lenient, and as a consequence, it's ineffective at disincentivizing riders from doing dangerous behavior. But the next flaw in the yellow card system is arguably even a bigger problem. The decision-making of UCI commissaires is too inconsistent, both when applying rules and awarding yellow cards. I'll start by giving you 3 examples of sprint deviations that endangered other riders within the first 2 months of this year. During stage 2 of the Sound of Southern Under, Danny van Poppel deviates and endangers Tobias Lund Andresen, leading to a relegation and a yellow card. 2 days later, during stage 4 of the same race, Laurens Piffy deviates and endangers Henry Ulich. Piffy gets relegated, but gets no yellow card. And most recently, during stage 4 of Algarve, Milan Fretin deviates and endangers Wout van Aert. Fretin wins the race, gets no relegation and no yellow card. So wait, in case 1, Danny van Poppel gets a relegation and a yellow card. In case 2, Piffy gets a relegation but no yellow card. and Fretin doesn't even get relegated. Meanwhile, in each of these examples, they deviate and endanger another rider, so the deviation rule applies. Also, in all three, their behavior is susceptible of causing a risk for safety, because while they deviated and endangered, it's literally in the word, but somehow the UCI commissaire makes a different decision in each of these three cases. Firstly, if I'm a sprinter and I see other sprinters getting away with it, then the next time I'm gonna be less likely to follow the rules. But also, it's simply unfair to riders that do get punished while others don't. And that's why we see riders like Danny van Poppel lashing out to the UCI because they feel unfairly treated. And to be honest, I can't even blame him. Yes, he's shown to be not a clean sprinter this year, but others should be held at the same standard. So yeah, as always, the UCI and consistency do not go hand in hand, but it's a major flaw for this yellow card system. And actually, riders feeling unfairly treated aligns perfectly with our next problem. Riders feel unfairly treated when the UCI does not take accountability and race organizers are not held responsible for safety problems at races. Like, I don't even have to go far back to think of examples for this, because in the last 2 weeks we had 2 examples of speed bumps in the last 200 meters of a sprint stage. That is insane. Firstly, at Tour de la Provence, where Pascal Ackermann crashed over that speed bump, and then also at Vuelta a Andalusia. No crash happened there, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't call it out. Meanwhile, the parkour guidelines clearly state that the finishing straight should be free of all obstacles, including speed bumps. I understand that cities and villages pay for the race to end near their town center, but at the end of the day, safety should be our first priority. And if 99% of the cycling calendar can find 200 meters without a speed bump for the sprint stages, then all races should be able to do so. That is partially the responsibility of the race organizer, but also the UCI. They've got a UCI safety manager. What is the point of that person if they don't actually check the last 200 meters of a sprint stage for safety problems? Like, I truly believe that riders feel unfairly treated if they get penalized for breaking the rules, while the UCI or the race organizers never take accountability and are never held responsible. Anyway, those are my 3 main problems with the current format of the yellow card system, and in my personal opinion, that makes the system unfair and ineffective at what it's trying to do, which is basically disincentivizing people within the race convoy of doing dangerous behavior. If you don't apply rules and yellow cards consistently, it's unfair. And if you barely penalize any riders that actually do get multiple yellow cards, then there's no point in having the system in the first place. But I do want to make one thing very clear. I'm a major fan of a yellow card system within the sport of cycling, but not the way it's currently set up. So here's my proposal of the yellow card system 2.0. Okay, I want to start by changing how cards expire. In the current system, a yellow card that has been taken into account for a suspension basically expires. In my opinion, that's an unnecessary complication, so we are ditching that. In my system, yellow cards expire after exactly 1 year. Our second step is making sure the yellow card system is more strict, to make sure riders are disincentivized from doing dangerous behavior. So in my system, if a rider gets 2 yellow cards within a 30-day period, you get a disqualification and a 14-day suspension. Because in my opinion, if you get 2 yellow cards in 2 one-day races in the same exact week, that is exactly the same as getting 2 yellow cards in a stage race. Anyway, next to that, if a rider receives 3 yellow cards in a 90-day period, they get a disqualification and a 30-day suspension. Now, if a rider gets 4 yellow cards within a 1-year period, that's a disqualification from the race they're in and a 30-day suspension. And for every yellow card on top of that, that's once again a disqualification and a 30-day suspension. Importantly, keep in mind, in my system, yellow cards expire after 1 year. If we try the example of Danny van Poppel, who got a yellow card at Tour Down Under and UAE Tour, he would not have gotten 2 yellow cards within a single month. But he would be disincentivized from doing dangerous behavior again, because if he gets 3 yellow cards in a 90-day period, he'd get a 30-day suspension instead. Like, if we compare my yellow card system to the one in real life, then mine's more strict, but I think that has to be the case because we're talking about riders endangering other riders here. And let's be honest, if it's not strict, it's not going to be effective at changing rider behavior. So yeah, this yellow card system is the best I could come up with in about 45 minutes. Seems like the UCI thought about it even less. But I bet my system isn't perfect either. So I'd like to ask you, what is your opinion on the yellow card system right now? Should it change? In what way should it change? And if you have a proposal, drop it in the comment section below. But I think it's important to note that changing the yellow card system won't be enough. There is a clear need for the re-education of UCI commissaires on the rules and how to apply those and how to give out yellow cards correctly. Because there's simply too much inconsistency. And of course, on top of that, the UCI, race organizers, every other stakeholder outside of the riders themselves also needs to make sure they uphold safety within cycling races, because otherwise, riders feel unfairly treated. Anyway, that's just my opinion. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.